You want to know where I got this fire in me? It didn't come from books. Didn't come from the church or some women's magazine. It came from my mother. Her name was Alma Louise Preston. Born in 1926, raised on a farm in Alabama with 6 brothers, 2 cows, and a stubborn streak that could bend steel. She wasn't loud, not the way some women are. She didn't shout. She didn't slap. She didn't slam doors or raise hell at the grocery store. But let me tell you something. When Alma got quiet, that's when you knew something was about to change. She married my father, Charles, when she was just 19. And yes, she was in love, but she wasn't naive. A man can promise you the moon, she once told me. But you better know how to build your own fire. They moved into a tiny house on a dirt road with nothing but a front porch, a kerosene lamp, and dreams too big for the roof they sat under. And she made it work. Lord, did she make it work. She cooked everything from scratch, pies that won county fairs, biscuits that could make a preacher weep. She raised 3 kids, stitched clothes from curtains, ran the books for my father's hardware store, and still found time to read a novel every now and then with her feet soaking in a basin of warm water. She was tough, but kind. Soft-spoken, but sharp as a whip. And she loved my father. I don't mean the kind of love you throw around casually. I mean the kind where you iron his shirts even after a fight. The kind where you lie awake listening for his truck to pull into the driveway, just to know he's safe. But Charles, he loved himself more. I didn't see it at first. As a child, you see what they let you see. He was charming. Told jokes. Made people laugh at the barber shop. But behind closed doors? He was a man full of corners. Always working late. Always whispering when the phone rang. Always smelling like a cologne mama didn't wear. And my mother. She noticed. She didn't say anything. Not at first. Because women back then? They were taught to swallow their suspicions. To protect the family name. To make it work, even when it was broken. But Alma Preston was nobody's fool. And the day she found out what he'd really been doing? Oh, child. That was the day everything changed. Not with screams. Not with slaps. But with the wildest, smartest, most calculated revenge I've ever seen in my life. And I'm going to tell you exactly how she did it. Because when my mama decided to fight back, she didn't just get even. She made history, at least in our town. It started with a whisper. Not a voice, exactly. But something quiet inside mama that shifted, like a teacup rattling on the shelf before a storm hits. I must have been around 12. Old enough to notice things, too young to understand them fully. Daddy came home late one night. Again. His truck lights swept across the yard like they always did. But the engine idled longer than usual. Mama stood at the kitchen sink, hands in the dishwater, not moving. She just stared out the window, her eyes fixed on something I couldn't see. When he walked in, he kissed her on the cheek like nothing had happened. She smiled. But it didn't reach her eyes. "Long night?" she asked, drying her hands slow. "Busy," he replied. "Inventory. Had to do a supply run." She turned around, leaned against the counter, and looked at him the way a mother looks at a child who swears he didn't eat the last piece of pie. That was the first time I noticed it. Not anger. Not sadness. Just awareness. She didn't ask questions. Didn't accuse. She just started watching. Like a woman preparing for something she wasn't ready to name out loud. And then came the lipstick. Mama never wore lipstick. Not even to church. Said it felt like clown paint. So when she found a smudge of red on the collar of Daddy's white work shirt, I saw something in her change. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stared at it, quiet, focused. Like it was a math problem she suddenly knew how to solve. She took the shirt. Pressed it. Washed it herself. Folded it neatly. And then went on like nothing happened. But I knew better. That weekend, she made his favorite dinner. Roast with mashed potatoes, corn fritters, and chess pie for dessert. She set the table perfectly. Used the linen napkins from the wedding trunk. Lit the fancy candles she usually saved for holidays. "This looks mighty nice," Daddy said, grinning. "Well," Mama replied, smiling sweetly, "you've been working so hard. Figured you earned something special." He kissed her cheek again. And I watched her smile without blinking. That night, after the dishes were done, she pulled me aside in the hallway. Kneeled down so we were eye to eye. "Baby," she whispered, "sometimes men think they're clever. But clever ain't the same as wise." "Yes, ma'am," I said, not fully understanding. "Your daddy's making choices right now. And I'm gonna give him space to fix it. But if he doesn't..." She stood up slowly. "He's gonna learn who he married." And with that, she went to bed. Calm. Still. And dangerous. After that night, things didn't explode. They tightened. Mama moved through the house like she always had. She cooked, cleaned, ironed Daddy's shirts. She kissed him goodbye every morning and asked about his day every evening. But something was different. She had stopped being his wife in her heart. And started becoming his audience, watching the show. That's when the letters began. I didn't know about them at the time. Not until years later, after Mama had passed, and I found them. Stacked neatly in a box, tied with a ribbon, marked simply, "For me." They weren't love letters. They weren't rants, either. They were records. Careful, handwritten entries like diary pages. Dated, detailed, and deliberate. March 3rd. Charles came home late. Smelled like tobacco and something floral. Unfamiliar. March 14th, found receipt in coat pocket, motel outside of town. 2 meals. 2 drinks. April 1st, Clara May saw him with someone at Mel's diner. Blonde. Young. Laughing too loud. She never said the words directly. But she wrote around them with precision. Like stitching a quilt with lines of pain and restraint. She tracked everything. Not to confront him. Not yet. But to remember. To prepare. To own the truth. Because the worst part of betrayal isn't what they do. It's how they try to convince you it never happened. Mama was never going to let him rewrite the story. And so she wrote her own, every night, in cursive so clean it looked like it had been printed. Sometimes I'd hear the scratch of her pen late into the night. Long after Daddy was snoring down the hall. She sat at the kitchen table, the overhead light a dull yellow, her tea cooling beside her as she wrote. She'd pause. Think. Then write again. Every word, a weapon she wasn't ready to use yet. But oh, how sharp they were. One afternoon, I asked her why she'd started writing so much. She looked up from her notebook and smiled softly. "Sometimes, baby, when people stop listening, you write things down so you don't forget who you are." At the time, I thought she was talking about poems. Or prayers. But now I know. She was building her case. Not for a judge. Not for revenge. But for justice. Her own kind. The kind that doesn't beg or plead or scream. The kind that smiles at the liar across the table. And knows exactly what's coming next. I'll never forget that Thursday. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. There were no plates thrown, no doors slammed, no screaming matches in the yard. No. It was quiet. Too quiet. Mama had always moved with rhythm, humming when she cleaned, tapping her fingers when she stirred gravy, muttering scripture under her breath when she folded laundry. But that day? Nothing. She didn't hum. Didn't tap. Didn't even speak unless she had to. She just moved. Deliberate. Controlled. Like she was conserving energy for something we couldn't see yet. Even Daddy noticed. "You all right, Alma?" he asked that night at dinner. She spooned potatoes onto her plate slowly. Didn't look up. "I'm fine." "You sure? You've been real quiet lately." She raised her eyes and met his. "Maybe I just ran out of things worth saying." The air went cold. He chuckled nervously, tried to change the subject. Asked if she needed anything from town. Mentioned the weather. She nodded. Sipped her tea. Didn't add a single word more than necessary. The thing is, men like Charles, they expect drama. They prepare for yelling, threats, breakdowns. What they can't handle is silence. And Mama's silence wasn't empty. It was full. Full of calculation. Full of memory. Full of decisions she had already made but hadn't yet revealed. That weekend, she rearranged the house. Not redecorated, rearranged. She moved the wedding photo from the living room into a drawer. Took down the quilt his mother had sewn and folded it into a chest. She even changed the bed sheets, new ones, ivory and blue. Clean slate. She told me to help her move boxes from the attic. Spring cleaning, she said. But it wasn't spring. And those boxes weren't dusty. Inside, I saw files. Bank statements. The deed to the house. And her father's old revolver, wrapped in a dish towel. "You holding on to that for something?" I asked. She smiled. "Just remembering who this house belongs to." And then she locked the box. That Sunday, she went to church wearing lipstick for the first time in my life. Red. Firetruck red. The same shade she found on Daddy's collar weeks ago. She didn't say a word. She just walked down the aisle, head held high, shoulders back, like she owned the whole congregation. And in a way, she did. Because everyone who saw her that day, they felt the shift. The calm before the storm. And Charles? He felt it too. I watched his face when she stepped out of the car in that lipstick, that new dress, that confidence that didn't ask permission anymore. He smiled. But it wasn't comfort. It was fear. Because men like him, they know when the game's almost over. It started with a phone call. Mama answered it while peeling apples on the porch. I don't know what was said. I only heard her voice say, "Oh, how sweet of you to call." "Well, yes, you're more than welcome to join us." When she hung up, I asked who it was. She didn't look up from the apples. "Just someone your father forgot to mention." That was all she said. That night, she made fried chicken, Daddy's favorite. Cornbread from scratch. Collard greens with smoked turkey. And pecan pie with homemade whipped cream. The house smelled like Sunday morning. Mama set the table with the good china. The crystal glasses from their wedding. The lace tablecloth her own mother had given her when she got married. "We expecting company?" Daddy asked, sniffing the air. Mama said, wiping her hands. A special guest. He looked confused. She smiled. You'll see. At 6:45, there was a knock at the door. And there she was. The woman from the motel receipts. The woman with the perfume that didn't belong in our house. The woman whose lipstick matched the one on that shirt collar. She stood there in heels and a tight dress, holding a bottle of cheap wine like she was delivering something holy. Hi, she said sweetly. I'm Cheryl. Mama beamed. Of course you are. Come in, sugar. Daddy went pale. I mean ghost pale. He didn't say a word as Cheryl stepped into our house like she belonged there. Dinner's just about ready, Mama said. Make yourself at home. And Cheryl, bless her confused little heart, she did. She sat at our table. Crossed her legs. Thanked Mama for the invitation. Charles talks about you all the time, she said to Mama with a nervous smile. Mama nodded slowly, placing the bowl of greens down like a queen laying down judgment. I'm sure he does. We all sat down. No one spoke for the first few bites. Just chewing, silverware clinking, and tension thick as cornbread batter. Then Mama broke the silence. You know, Cheryl, I'm glad you came. Cheryl smiled, still unsure if she was in a dream or a trap. That's kind of you to say. Well, Mama continued, it's not every day I get to meet the woman sleeping with my husband. Cheryl choked. Daddy dropped his fork. Silence. Then Mama took a long, slow sip of iced tea. Oh, don't worry. Eat up. This meal's for you. Alma, Daddy started. She raised a hand. Charles, hush. She turned back to Cheryl. You didn't know he was married, did you? Cheryl stammered. Of course you didn't. He lies easy. Always has. Then she stood up. Calm. Dignified. Terrifying. But now you both know. So let's not waste food. She placed a manila envelope on the table. Inside, you'll find copies of motel receipts, photos, handwritten statements, and a list of bank withdrawals that don't line up with our ledger. She looked at Daddy. You're going to sign over your share of the business tomorrow. You'll leave the house by Friday. And you'll never, ever speak to me again unless it's through an attorney. She turned to Cheryl one last time. If you're smart, you'll leave too. If not, well, that's your problem now. Then she walked out of the dining room. Took off her apron. Hung it on the hook. And poured herself a glass of pie wine in the kitchen. And I swear to you, I had never seen a woman look so powerful in silence. He was gone by Friday. Just like she said. No begging. No grand apology. No suitcase packed by Mama, he packed his own. And she watched from the kitchen window as he backed his truck out of the driveway one last time. She didn't wave. Didn't cry. She just sipped her tea and whispered. Good riddance. That weekend, she took a pair of scissors to the bedroom curtains. Not out of rage, but to repurpose them. She cut them into squares, hemmed the edges, and turned them into new kitchen towels. Fresh start, she said. Even for the rags. She rearranged the furniture. Repainted the walls. Donated every item he ever bought her, including the watch he gave her for their 10th anniversary, the one she'd worn out of habit, never love. She changed her hair. Bought a pair of slacks, something she'd never worn before because Charles preferred skirts. She even bought herself a small record player. Played Billie Holiday, Patsy Cline, Mahalia Jackson. Music filled the house again. And this time, it didn't feel like it was waiting for someone else to come home. Mama started laughing more. She cooked less, just enough for herself. She read more. She even started writing her own letters, not about betrayal, but about joy. About freedom. And that's when I realized. She wasn't just surviving. She was becoming someone new. Someone lighter. Stronger. Wiser. She never once spoke poorly of him in public. Never trashed his name at church or among neighbors. She didn't have to. Everyone knew. And the way she held her head high when she walked down Main Street in her new dress and fresh lipstick? That was louder than any gossip could have been. Even Cheryl left town eventually. Some say she moved in with her sister. Others say she packed up and disappeared one night without a word. Mama never asked. She'd already moved on. One day I asked her if she ever missed him. She looked at me, paused, and said, "I don't miss him. I miss who I thought he was." That stayed with me. Because there's a difference between grieving a person and grieving the idea of them. Mama taught me how to let go of the idea. She lived another 30 years after that. Happy. Free. Peaceful. And when she passed, the funeral home couldn't hold everyone who came. Friends. Neighbors. Women she'd helped. Even a few men who said, "She made me better." Because that's who she was. Not just a woman scorned. Not just a wife betrayed. But a woman who turned heartbreak into a second act. And made it her best one yet. I think about her often. Sometimes when I look in the mirror and catch a glimpse of her chin, strong, a little defiant. Sometimes when I stand in the kitchen, quietly stirring a pot with the radio humming behind me. And sometimes, when I find myself choosing peace over drama, silence over shouting, grace over revenge. That was her way. Not weak. Not passive. But measured. Exact. Undeniable. She taught me that power doesn't have to roar. Sometimes, it whispers. That you don't always have to raise your voice to prove a point. Sometimes all you need is a steady hand and a plan no one saw coming. She showed me what dignity looks like. Not the kind found in magazines or at galas. But the kind that lives in women who've been broken. And still choose to walk tall. When I got older, and my own life got messy, when I loved the wrong people, trusted the wrong ones, or found myself crying over things I thought would last forever. I remembered her. I remembered the dinner. The silence. The lipstick. The line she drew in the sand and never stepped back from. And every time I wanted to fold, I'd hear her voice. "They'll only take what you're willing to give." So I stopped giving to people who only knew how to take. And now, as I sit here, telling you this story, not just as your grandmother, but as a woman who came from a woman like that, I need you to know something. There is strength in you, too. Whether you're 16 or 66. Whether you're in love or just walked away from it. Whether you're still hoping or barely hanging on. You come from a line of fire. A line of women who didn't just survive. They reclaimed their stories. And no matter how deep the betrayal, no matter how loud the silence, no matter how much was stolen, you can start again. You can choose peace. You can take back your name. You can build a life that no one else gets to control. Because that's what my mama did. And that's what I did. And if you're listening to this, maybe that's what you're about to do too.